Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about how to deal with rule disputes between your players and your Dungeon Master, and how to keep things moving forward in your game of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Now, I run a channel that deals with rules all the time, and which is amusing because I've never really been tied to the rules that much, and now I kind of have to because I run a channel that deals with it all the time. So this video is not about saying, look, the Dungeon Master makes the final call and it's their way or the highway. I try to make it clear when I'm running a game with my players that I will be making the final call, but I am open to some communication about that. I don't really want to take up game time, so I tend to ask that rule disputes be settled outside of game, either before the game or after the game. And that could take place as a conversation after the game or before the game, or by email, or on Facebook, or I don't really use Twitter, but you could use Twitter if you really wanted to. And there are a couple of ways that my players have approached me in terms of getting me to deal with rules within the game so that I don't have to chew up too much time. And that's often one of the concerns that a Dungeon Master will have, is if I have to deal with rule disputes all the time in the game, it's very hard to keep things flowing. So this is one of the things that tends to happen in my game. There will be somebody who is more skilled with the rule system than I am, and if there is, then I will defer to them in terms of making a call. Now, your Dungeon Master might be able to do exactly the same thing. And if you are a Dungeon Master who is not completely familiar with the rules, you could look to one of your players who is more familiar to help you make calls until you feel comfortable with doing that yourself. Another way is I will not spend my time often looking through the book. Most of the rules are in the player's handbook. There's a few scattered throughout the Dungeon Master's guide, but most of them are in the player's handbook. I don't really want to spend my time checking that all the time. So my players will do that. So if there is a dispute whatsoever and they want to sort of settle it then and there, I will keep things moving, and I'll just say, look, if one of you wants to check that, look it up, find it, read it out when you find it, and we'll make a decision from there. So I'm perfectly fine with that as a solution for dealing with a rule dispute within the game so that it doesn't slow down things. But I am not going to stop. And we can reconnoiter or do things in retrospective if necessary. So there's another way to sort of deal with the rule systems, by actually looking through the book for the section for the Dungeon Master so that it doesn't take up their time. Another thing that will often happen is maybe there is a piece of information on sage advice. So if you have the internet and some technology at your table, like a phone or a laptop or a tablet, you can look up what Jeremy Crawford has given as sage advice on a particular topic. Often those little bits and pieces that you can't find in the player's handbook are on a website called Sage Advice for Dungeons & Dragons, and it's basically a collection of tweets. Really helpful for settling issues sometimes. Another way of dealing with rule disputes is outside of the game, which is really where most of mine take place, and that is my players will find a section, and then once they've found the rule, they will send me by email or on Facebook the page number and the section that it refers to so that I can check it. And if I've made a mistake or there's some adjustment that needs to take place, I can do that for future games. Even if there was a call that was made that was not correct the first time, or there was a dispute that needed to be settled, that can be dealt with later on. This really helps manage relationships between players and Dungeon Master, finding ways to deal with rule disputes without it turning into a fight. I would advise you as a player, don't get into arguments with your Dungeon Master about rules. Try to settle those things, like I said, by either finding the rules during the game if they're open to that, if they are open to that, or find out what the ruling is in the book, find the section, and then refer to it and send them a message or show them after the game or before the game where it is. And then the Dungeon Master can adjust how they operate in the future. And that's really all we're looking at, is trying to, just move forward. People make mistakes. There will be disputes. There is never going to be a time when somebody doesn't have an issue at some point with something. Now, with house rules, it's much more difficult, because house rules are usually constructed sometimes by the group playing, but usually by a dungeon master. And if they have a particular house rule, you kind of have to sort of just go with it. If you don't like it, you can't really dispute a rule that a dungeon master has created, because they created it. So you either live with it, or you move on and you find another group, or you dungeon master and you start your own group. That's really the solution to that. Look, I hope this was helpful to somebody out there who had concerns about how to deal with rule disputes between themselves and other players, or the dungeon master at their table. Look, if you had any questions on how to resolve issues with your dungeon master or other players regarding the rules, leave a comment below and I will do my best to answer those. And till next time, keep rolling those 20s.